All right, so today we're diving into something I know a lot of English learners struggle with, and that is that habit of translating everything in your head before you speak.
Yes, it can be a tough one to break.
Yeah, it's like having this invisible wall between you and truly speaking fluently.
Right.
I remember when I was learning Spanish, I would translate every single sentence in my head before I could even think about speaking.
Oh, yeah.
It was exhausting, and my conversations were so awkward.
Yeah.
But I eventually realized, to really speak fluently, I had to break free from that translation trap and just start thinking in Spanish directly.
Yeah.
So you shared some research and articles with me about how to actually do that,
I did.
how to stop translating in your head
Yeah.
and start speaking English more naturally.
Yeah. A lot of people struggle with this, and luckily there are some proven techniques to overcome it.
That's encouraging
It is.
because I think, a lot of listeners are probably thinking, well, that sounds great in theory, but how do I actually rewire my brain
Right.
to think differently?
Right. Well, first, let's understand why translating is so problematic.
Okay.
Because languages are more than just sets of words,
Yeah.
They have unique structures and ways of expressing ideas, and direct translation can lead to grammatically correct but very unnatural sounding English.
Yeah.
For example, in some languages you might say, I have 25 years to express your age.
Right.
But that sounds so odd to a native English speaker.
Right. It's that classic I have 25 years old mistake that a lot of learners make.
Exactly. So it's not just about getting the vocabulary right, it's about thinking in those English sentence patterns.
Right.
And then also translating just slows you down so much.
Oh, yeah.
You can imagine trying to have a conversation while mentally juggling two languages.
It's like running a race with weights strapped to your ankles.
It is exactly. It's so much extra work.
It's no wonder so many learners, feel hesitant and self-conscious when they speak because they're so focused on translating that they lose that natural flow of conversation.
Totally. That's why understanding how the brain learns language is key to sort of breaking this cycle.
Okay.
Think of it like learning guitar. You can't just watch videos and expect to be able to play. You have to actually pick up the instrument and practice, right? And language is similar.
Yeah.
You need that active learning, not just passively listening or reading.
Right. So how do we actually shift from that passive to active learning?
Right.
And train our brains to think directly in English?
Okay, well, you can start small.
Okay.
Instead of trying to translate entire sentences in your head, begin by thinking single words in English.
Okay.
So if you see a bird, think bird, not the word for bird in your native language.
Okay.
And then you can gradually build up to phrases and eventually whole sentences.
So it's like building a muscle. We start with light weights and then gradually increase the resistance.
Exactly.
I like that.
Another really powerful tool is self-talk.
Self-talk.
Yeah, just narrate your day in English. I'm making breakfast, I'm going to work, I need to buy milk at the store. Simple things like that.
Okay.
It might feel strange at first, but it gets your brain accustomed to forming those thoughts in English.
Yeah, I can see how that's going to be a lot more effective than, just passively listening to a podcast or something.
Exactly.
You're really actively engaging your brain.
You are.
And it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage.
No, not at all. The goal is just to create that habit of thinking in English,
Okay.
even if it's just short bursts throughout the day.
What about when we encounter new words?
Right.
Do we have to look up every single word?
Not necessarily. You can try using visualization instead of translation.
Okay.
So for example, when you hear the word tree, don't think of the word for tree in your native language.
Okay.
Instead, picture a tall tree with branches and leaves.
Okay.
That direct connection between the word and its meaning will help you bypass that translation step.
So we're kind of creating mental flashcards with images instead of, the translation.
Exactly. And as you build your vocabulary, you can start incorporating more complex visualization techniques.
Okay.
So for example, if you hear the word freedom, you might visualize a bird soaring through the sky.
That's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Representing that concept of freedom.
That's a really powerful image.
Yeah.
I can see how that would create a much stronger connection than, just memorizing a definition or something.
Exactly.
Okay, what about listening and repeating?
Yes. That's another really good technique. So find some English podcasts or shows that you enjoy and try repeating phrases or sentences out loud.
Okay.
It's like practicing scales on the piano.
Right.
You're training your mouth and your brain to produce those sounds and rhythms naturally.
So it's not just about expanding our vocabulary. It's about absorbing the musicality of the language, the
Exactly.
way native speakers actually use it.
Yes.
What about when it comes to actually speaking with other people? Should we wait until we feel super confident before we even open our mouths?
Absolutely not. Speaking practice is crucial from day one.
Okay.
The more you use English in those real-life situations, the faster you'll break free from that translation habit and develop fluency.
But what about the fear of making mistakes?
Yeah.
Because I think that holds a lot of people back.
It's a very common fear, and we're actually going to address that specifically later on in our deep dive.
Okay.
But for now, just remember that mistakes are inevitable,
Okay.
and they're actually valuable learning opportunities.
Right.
Don't let the fear of making a mistake prevent you from actually speaking and practicing.
It's like learning to ride a bike.
Exactly.
You're going to fall a few times
Yeah, you gotta fall off a few times.
before you find your balance.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more confident and fluent you'll become.
Okay.
So we have a lot more to dive into, so stay tuned for the next part.
Yeah, this is exciting stuff.
It is.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to our deep dive into breaking the translation barrier.
So in the last part, we talked about why translating in your head can really hold you back from becoming fluent. And we started exploring some steps to kind of break free from that habit.
Right.
So now, let's get even more practical.
Yeah.
Like, how can we actually make English our default thought language?
Right.
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
So it's all about rewiring those neural pathways and creating these new habits.
Okay.
One really powerful technique is just using English for your everyday thoughts,
Hmm.
even simple ones.
So instead of thinking I'm tired in my native language,
Mm.
I should consciously think I'm tired in English.
Precisely.
Okay.
And these seemingly small moments, they really add up.
Okay.
So think about your to-do list, what you're having for dinner, even your thoughts about the weather. Do it all in English.
Basically, give my inner monologue an English makeover.
Exactly. Another technique is labeling your surroundings in English.
Okay.
So look around and mentally name everything you see. Right. Chair, table, book, window.
Yeah.
It kind of turns your everyday environment into this English vocabulary playground.
So it's like turning my house into a giant English label maker.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
And the more you do it, the stronger those associations become, and you'll just start thinking in English without even realizing it.
That makes sense for objects.
Right.
But what about more complex thoughts?
Right.
Like when I'm trying to work through a problem or I'm having a conversation in my head, you know?
Right. Well, that's where cultivating an inner monologue in English comes in.
Okay.
So imagine you're narrating your own life like a movie, but in English.
Oh, okay.
So I need to finish this report. What should I make for dinner? I wonder if that new movie is any good.
Like, my thoughts have their own English voiceover.
Exactly.
But what about, those moments when we need to think quickly,
Right.
like in a fast-paced conversation?
Yeah.
How can we avoid defaulting back to translation,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, this is where thinking in pictures, not words, is really crucial.
Okay.
Remember that freedom analogy.
Yeah.
Instead of translating the word, you directly visualize a bird soaring.
Right.
Apply that to everything.
No.
So if someone says beach, picture a sunny beach with waves crashing, not the translated word for beach.
So it's about connecting directly to the meaning and bypassing that translation step altogether.
Exactly. And this will help you think and respond in English much faster.
Okay.
Now, of course, there will be times when your native language pops up. It's
Yeah.
natural, especially when you're tired or you're dealing with really complex ideas.
Right.
But just be patient with yourself. It's a process.
It's like training a muscle.
Exactly.
We have to push ourselves, but also give ourselves time to rest and recover.
Exactly.
I like that.
And celebrate the victories.
Okay.
When you notice you're catching yourself thinking in English without even any effort,
Right.
those small wins show that your brain really is rewiring itself.
I love that. It's so easy to get discouraged and focus on what we haven't mastered yet.
Right.
But celebrating that progress can really help us stay motivated.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of motivation, creating an immersive English environment can also make a huge difference, right?
Absolutely.
That sounds intriguing. Like, how can we do that without actually living in an English-speaking country?
Well, think about all the ways you interact with your native language throughout the day.
Okay.
Reading, listening, watching.
Right.
Now try replicating those in English.
So switch out those native language books and music and movies for their English counterparts.
Exactly. And start with material that's enjoyable and not too difficult.
Yeah.
Building confidence is key here.
I can definitely see how that would make a big difference. It's like surrounding yourself with the sounds and the rhythms of the language all the time.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be, these huge changes, right?
Right.
We can make small adjustments. Yeah.
Right? Don't underestimate those small changes. Change your phone settings to English.
Okay.
Follow English language accounts on social media.
Okay.
Even those tiny adjustments add up.
It's like weaving English into the fabric of our lives.
Exactly. And remember, it's about finding that balance that works for you.
Right.
You don't have to go from 0 to 100 overnight.
Cool.
So we're creating this English bubble around ourselves.
Yeah.
What about specific resources and tools?
Right.
What should we look for?
Yeah, what should we be using?
Well, relevance is key. Choose materials that genuinely interest you.
Okay.
Whether it's books, podcasts, movies, or online resources.
Right.
If you're bored, you're less likely to stick with it.
It's like choosing a workout routine.
Exactly.
If you hate running, you're not going to be motivated to go for a jog every day.
Exactly. And start with material that's slightly below your current level.
Okay.
Building confidence and fluency is more important than struggling through something super advanced.
Makes sense. We want a challenge, but not one that makes us want to give up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to experiment with different formats.
Okay.
Some people learn best through visual materials, others through audio.
Right.
Try different approaches and see what clicks for you.
So explore those language learning apps and podcasts and online communities.
Yeah.
Whatever else sparks our interest.
Exactly.
I like that.
And remember, real-world practice is essential.
Yes.
Look for those opportunities to interact with English speakers.
Okay.
Even if it's just striking up a conversation with a tourist or attending an event hosted by an international organization or something.
It's all about pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones.
Exactly.
And embracing those opportunities to practice.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground in this part.
We have.
But there are even more advanced techniques to help you really master this art of thinking in English.
Okay.
So stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive.
All right. This is exciting.
It is.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into thinking in English.
So we've already covered a lot of ground, from understanding why translating in your head hinders fluency to, exploring practical tips for making English your default thought language.
And in this last part, we're going to delve into even more advanced techniques.
Yes.
To really help us, master this skill.
Yes. Let's start with language switching.
Okay.
That's the ability to seamlessly switch between thinking and speaking in different languages.
So instead of trying to completely eliminate my native language, I can actually embrace both.
Exactly. Bilingualism is a valuable asset, and language switching allows you to harness that effectively. It's like having two mental toolboxes that you can choose from depending on the situation.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
But how do we actually develop this, language switching agility?
So one technique is code switching, which involves intentionally mixing English and your native language in conversation. For example, you might use an English idiom, but then explain it with a phrase in your native language.
Okay.
Or vice versa.
So it's not about being pure in either language, but rather using both strategically and creatively.
Precisely. It's a very natural part of bilingual communication.
Okay.
And it can make you a more versatile and nuanced speaker.
I like that. What about mental translation?
Yes. So take a text or a conversation in your native language and mentally translate it into English.
Okay.
Paying attention to nuances and idiomatic expressions.
So it's like a mental workout.
It is.
Or our language skills.
Yes. It helps bridge that gap between the two language systems.
Right.
And strengthens your ability to think flexibly in both.
Okay. What about shadowing?
Ah, yes. Shadowing is a great technique. So listen to someone speaking in English and simultaneously repeat what they're saying.
Oh, wow.
Trying to match their pronunciation, their intonation, even their pauses.
So I'm essentially trying to become like a vocal chameleon.
You could say that.
Adapting to the way native speakers use the language.
Exactly. And it helps you absorb those subtle nuances that go beyond, textbook grammar and vocabulary.
Right. Okay, those are some really great techniques for language switching.
Yeah.
I'm curious about something else, though.
Okay.
What about just having fun with the language?
Oh, yes.
Can that help us think in English more naturally?
Absolutely. Language play is a fantastic way to break free from rigid thinking
Go.
and explore the creative side of English.
Tell me more. How can we tap into our inner language artist?
Okay, well, you could try word association games.
Oh, okay.
So start with a single word and let your mind wander, connecting it to other words, images, and ideas all in English.
Okay.
It's a really fun way to build those neural pathways
Right.
and expand your vocabulary.
So if I start with the word happy, I might think of, sunshine, laughter, friends, celebration.
Exactly. You're creating this web of associations
Right.
that deepens your understanding of the word and its various shades of meaning. I like that. It's like a mental treasure hunt for words.
It is.
What about idioms and slang?
Ah, yes, those are great. So idioms are those colorful expressions that don't always make literal sense.
Right.
But they add so much richness to the language.
Yeah, they do.
And slang keeps things fresh.
Okay.
And it reflects how people actually speak, in informal settings.
So instead of saying, I'm very tired, I could say, I'm beat, or I'm running on fumes.
Exactly. It adds color and personality to your language
All right.
and shows that you're really comfortable with the nuances of English.
I can see how embracing idioms and slang would make my English sound a lot more natural
It does.
and less textbook-like.
Yeah.
Any other tips for, injecting some fun into our English practice?
Yeah, just don't be afraid to get creative.
Okay.
Try making puns, writing silly poems, or even coming up with your own wordplay.
Okay.
The goal is just to engage with the language in a playful way, free from self-judgment.
It's like giving ourselves permission to be silly and make mistakes without, feeling embarrassed.
Exactly. That's where the real magic happens. When we let go of that fear of imperfection, we open ourselves up to new possibilities and deeper learning.
Wow, we've covered so much in this deep dive.
We have.
From debunking that myth of translation to exploring these really advanced techniques like language switching and language play, it's been an incredible journey.
It has. And remember, this is just the beginning.
Right.
The more you practice these techniques and immerse yourself in the language, the more natural and effortless thinking in English will become.
To all our listeners out there, don't be afraid to experiment, challenge yourself, and most importantly, have fun with the process. Fluency isn't a destination. It's an ongoing journey of discovery and growth.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll even find yourself dreaming in English.
That would be amazing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into thinking in English. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Until next time, happy learning.